There was a huge outrage going on all over the world on social media and streets against Israel. And it's about, did Israel, were they callous with civilians? Too many civilians died. Now, I tell you personally, I do this after every conflict I can. I sit and spend time crying over casualties. I'm not trying to share some virtue signaling or something. Yes, I think every time a life is lost, it's tragic. It doesn't matter which side it's on or by whom. But, and this is really important, when we talk about Israel being callous with civilian casualties, really? Let's just think for one moment what urban warfare is like. Let's think of very morally clear conflicts. I think this is actually a very morally clear conflict. Let's think for a moment what Hamas was doing, right? They were firing salvos of over 100 rockets at a time to try to overwhelm Israel's Iron Dome with the hope they could slaughter thousands of civilians. They planned drones and strikes and mortar strikes on the border communities and anti-tank weapons, which thank God were all destroyed very quickly. And Israel's Iron Dome worked for the most part, and although there's tragic losses on Israel's side, they're very, very small. But also on the other side, Israel obviously had to strike. You can't just sit there trying to fire iron domes all day. Stuff's going to get through. If you leave them long enough, hundreds of thousands of civilians could die even with iron domes. You have to go and try and force them to stop firing. You have to hit their bunkers. You have to strike at them so that they stop. But the problem is they built the greatest human shielding in history, perhaps. And when we think, human shielding means even moral armies aiming to hit terror groups are going to kill civilians. Think about ISIS. ISIS wasn't firing rockets at America or Britain or France, but they were clearly a huge threat to the world and they needed to be eliminated. So in the town of Raqqa, their final stand, when there was 1,200 ISIS fighters, and America, Britain, France hit them with precision. But they were in underground place under civilians using civilian human shields. Between 1,600 and 6,000 civilians died in those strikes. That's not America, France, or Britain's fault. They tried their best. It's just the reality of urban warfare when you're using human shields. In Mosul, in Iraq, when they did the same thing, 3,200 civilians died. In the last conflict in Gaza, it was 1,000 civilians. That was less, but and 1,000 fighters. It's how human shielding goes. You try your best, but of course, tragically, humans are going to die. This battle is the first, perhaps in living memory, where a military tried the hardest not to kill civilians, and less than 1,000 civilians died in urban. This wasn't 6,000 dead civilians, it wasn't 3,200, it wasn't 1,600. It was with such precision. And by the way, to hit a bunker, they hit 100 miles of what this so-called metro, underground bunkers of Hamas. To hit a bunker, you got to use a bunker buster bomb. That means something goes deep underground, powerful enough. And yet somehow Israel would aim the munitions so they wouldn't destroy the homes on top. It kept thousands upon thousands of civilians alive. There was a case where they hit a senior Hamas command bunker that had been deliberately positioned between 6 schools. Not a single school child was killed or injured. That's the level of extent to which Israel was going to try to preserve life. In a sense, a moral miracle. And I say that fully cognizant of the tragic level of those who did lose their life. It is tragic. But the real story here is Hamas, who set up thousands of deaths on the Israeli side and set up thousands and hundreds of millions of human shields on the Palestinian side. And this real story here is a military that managed for the first time in history to keep so many thousands upon thousands alive that we have not yet seen a conflict with so few civilian casualties in such dense urban human shielding environments. And the United Nations should be forming commissions to study this and understand what are the new standards of warfare we need so that never again do we see 1,000 dead civilians. Now, obviously, it's not enough. We want to never again see 200 dead civilians or 60 dead children or 100 dead civilians or anything. We don't want to see a dead civilian. In fact, we don't want to see a dead soldier. But let's commend Israel for how many lives it succeeded in saving, how many tens of thousands of lives it succeeded in saving, or even one life it succeeded in saving. The rage on the street. And it's the same street that doesn't come out when 12 million Uyghur Muslims are being persecuted in China. I remember being almost alone in a rally. Where's everyone else jumping? Or when Assad is barrel bombing his Sunni Muslim population. Where's everyone jumping? This rage, what, 1 million civilians got killed? 100,000 civilians got killed? Why is this like livid rage, almost like the drug addict who sees drugs and just can't stop their brain going completely crazy? It's like bizarre. But moral clarity tells us that we cry over every single civilian loss, and we commend the extent to which Israel went to preserve life, while we condemn the horror to which Hamas went to ensure slaughter on all sides. The success Israel had in making Hamas fail, that there weren't thousands of dead Israelis and there weren't thousands of dead Palestinians. And then we pray for an end to all of this, to all the conflict, freedom and justice for everybody, peace for everybody, an end not just to civilian casualties, but to all warfare. And pray together, at least I hope we all pray together, For that which the prophet says will come the day they shall beat their swords into plowshares and spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, nor shall they learn any more war.